Hi everyone, I'm Eddie. I'm here at Big Winds with a rare visit from Tiesda all the way from Thailand. Here just to answer some questions about wind foiling. He is Starboard's main brand manager and also designer, and at least for the last 3 or 4 years been focused almost exclusively on foils. Tiesda, thanks so much for coming.
Thanks a lot, Eddie.
Yeah, we appreciate it. So I'm just going to dive in. One of the big things I see people talking about is how perhaps that today's foils are yesterday's football fins in windsurfing. That is that this is something that the technology is so new, they're fearing that whatever they're riding now, a year or two from now, might be outdated. Is that your perception?
I'd say that, to be honest, a lot of those, I don't know, let's call it like the football fin idea, those radical big changes and concepts and things, it has already been done. We've already been through that. I'm not even talking about the last 2-3 years. I'm talking about the 80s. You know, you've seen everyone building these crazy foils and, you know, L foils, 4 foils, T foils, self-regulating foils, mechanical foils. So I would say that we've already started to enter the maturing phase. Things are starting to settle down. There are still some improvements in terms of materials, maybe some geometry tweaks or wing dimensions and aspect ratios. But it's more similar to, like, let's say maybe where fins are today, for example, or even rigs, you know. Like people have settled on what rig works. There's still some evolutions. But like a rig, the great thing about our foil is that it's modular. Yeah. So as things do evolve, you can simply swap out a part.
A lot of the questions we hear about the foils often relate to just the variables, from mast to fuselage to wings. You know, from the top down, I was hoping you could help answer questions maybe on the mast to start with. For example, what do you get with a short mast versus a long mast? What are some of the benefits of each, and what are some of the trade-offs?
Yeah, when it comes to these dimensions, which you can refer to as like the foil geometry, the most important thing is it's all very relative. It's relative to your style and your discipline. For example, a racer to a beginner, to a guy who wants to do like we call it the vertical style, no harness foiling. It's all relative. So choosing the right foil depends on understanding what you're looking for. When it comes to the mast height, for example, let's say first we look at the beginner. A lot of people think that the shorter mast is actually easier and the longer mast will be more difficult. It's not that quite straightforward, because while it's true that a short mast means that when you foil out, you'll be coming down from a lower height, so it's a little bit safer, if you like, to crash with a 60-centimeter mast. Yeah. On the other hand, if a foil is so short, then you don't have that much room between when you take off to when the wings will come out of the water. So in that regard, a longer one actually gives you more time, so you won't fall out as often. And then you have to look at the water conditions. If it's, you know, really nice and flat, you get away with a shorter mast. If it's a little bit choppy, or, you know, those kind of deep, narrow, short ones where you can't really go with the waves, you just have to go through them, a short mast becomes very difficult, because you're almost sure that as you pass the crest of a wave, you're going to foil out and you're going to come down again. So it's all a little bit relative. I think if someone was starting to learn foiling, I would recommend obviously a medium mast.
Yeah, and just to give some reference, a medium mast being somewhere in like the 75?
75, yeah. I would say the sweet spot is between 75 and 85. So, now let's talk about racers, for example. Racers, they're generally on 95s. You switch to a 110 if like the waves were really big and you wanted more room to pass your foil jibes without touching down.
Does the mast length, and similar to fins, does a longer mast give more power to go upwind or more power to rise? Is there any impact on the length in terms of the performance that you might get for rising earlier or having more power to point?
Rising earlier, I would say you wouldn't really have an advantage at what speed you actually take off. But the advantage is that you have more amplitude to pump. You have a larger tolerance for your foil jibes. So let's say the wind was really light, and if you touch down, you'd be stuck on the water and you'd lose like maybe 100 meters. Yeah. So that's quite important. In terms of the leverage for angling upwind, it's a complicated one, because it depends on your board as well. If you have a really wide board or a less narrow board, it gets to a point where if you go too tall and your board is not giving the leverage you need, you might not necessarily gain anything. I'm not sure if you would really lose anything either. Yeah, and then we found circumstances where going even down to 85, the water lets you water condition lets you get away with an 85. You do have a little bit more, you know, leverage. So it's a lot like, you know, it's one of those questions where, like on a bicycle gear,
yeah,
you know, which gear is the fastest? Well, it depends when you're going uphill or downhill,
right,
you know, stuff like that.
But you're relating tail width in a board is somehow related to how long or short a foil. There's some correlation there between what's going to maximize a foil's performance or a mast length performance,
yeah, there's definitely a correlation, but I have to clarify because we tend to do more of the foiling where it's like, we call it like a racing style, so you tend to lean out more.
Yeah.
And you're fully loading everything, the sail, the mast, the foil, everything is like pumped, you know? And
sailing at extreme angles, up and downwind.
Up and downwind, and you're going for as high speed you can. So in that one, I felt that there's a very strong relationship between the tail width and the mast length. Now we're focusing a lot more on the other style of foiling, which is kind of like, I kind of call it like the vertical styling.
Yeah.
Like harnesses are optional. I think we're doing a lot of it yesterday. That was
absolutely
really fun. And that one is really, really fun. And what I found on that one is that the mast length is not, I would say it's more relative to your level and what you're looking for. Like we were watching Tony, he was on a 111 mast, you know, tiny little board.
Well, not a wide tail at all.
Exactly. So, so that goes to show that in that style, I think the mast length is no longer depending on your board width, but probably more in terms of your skill, because you're sort of like on stilts now, you know, so you're keeping your balance. I think we were on a 85 and 75 yesterday.
Absolutely.
Tony was on a 111, and yeah, I had my foot out on the foot strap more towards the middle, so obviously at that point you're not using the leverage of the board anymore.
Right.
Wow.